In December 1978, David Tran converted everything he owned into 100 ounces of gold. He hid the gold bars inside cans of condensed milk to evade communist authorities. Then he boarded a Taiwanese freighter called the Huy Fong with his wife and young son, joining 3,000 other Vietnamese refugees crammed into the ship's hold. The ship sat anchored off Hong Kong for 34 days, while British authorities refused to let them land. 14 months later, Tran was delivering hot sauce in a blue Chevy van to Asian restaurants across Los Angeles. 45 years after that, his company was valued at over $1 billion. He had built the most iconic hot sauce brand in American history without spending a single dollar on advertising. Then he destroyed his most important business relationship and watched his empire begin to crumble. In today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we examine the refugee who conquered America with a rooster on a bottle and the betrayal that may cost him everything. By 2015, David Tran had built one of the most improbable business empires in American history. Huy Fong Foods generated an estimated $150 million in annual revenue. Over 20 million bottles were sold annually, and demand consistently exceeded supply. The rooster bottle had become ubiquitous in American kitchens, restaurants, and food media, mentioned in countless recipes, referenced in popular culture, beloved by chefs and home cooks alike. The psychology driving such empire building and the family devastation it produces receives extended treatment in our free Substack newsletter, where dynasties too complex for documentary format reveal what inherited ambition actually costs across generations. The Tran family story belongs in that company. In December 2009, Bon Appetit magazine named Huy Fong Sriracha Ingredient of the Year for 2010, one of the most prestigious endorsements in food journalism. Astronauts brought bottles to space. Silicon Valley engineers adopted it as a status symbol. All of this without a single dollar spent on advertising. No television commercials, no sponsored social media campaigns, no celebrity endorsements, no billboard placements. When asked why, Tran replied, "The product must sell itself." Tran's philosophy was captured in a single statement: make a rich man's sauce at a poor man's price. He capped the wholesale price at levels that ensured profitability but rejected aggressive price escalation, even as inflation surged and demand skyrocketed. For decades, while other hot sauce brands implemented regular price increases, Huy Fong's wholesale price remained stable. The sauce was accessible to working-class families and immigrant communities, not just affluent consumers. The company operated from a gleaming 650,000 square foot mega factory in Irwindale, California, built in 2010 on 23 acres of land at a cost of approximately $40 million. The facility employed 80 full-time staff, with hundreds more hired during the harvest season from July through October. Tran had achieved something rare in food manufacturing: iconic status through the strength of the product alone. The secret was obsessive speed and freshness. Tran believed that the flavor profile of Sriracha depended critically on the freshness of the chili peppers at the moment of grinding. Unlike most processed food companies that tolerate lags between harvesting and processing, Tran demanded that peppers be ground within hours of harvest to preserve the bright, verdant taste of fresh jalapenos. This requirement shaped everything about the company's supply chain. For 28 years, one man made this possible: Craig Underwood, a fourth-generation farmer whose family had been ranching in Ventura County since 1867. Their partnership was, in Underwood's own words, highly unusual in the processing industry. Typically, food manufacturers maintain relationships with multiple suppliers to diversify risk. Tran and Underwood instead built a deeply integrated, almost exclusive partnership. They became more than business partners. They became friends. Underwood's children grew up alongside Tran's children. They dined together and attended each other's family events. Then Tran secretly planned to destroy him. And the story of how that betrayal unfolded begins on a freighter anchored off Hong Kong in 1978. David Tran was born in 1945 in Soc Trang, a quiet Mekong Delta town in South Vietnam, during the twilight of French colonial rule. He was born in the year of the rooster, according to the Chinese zodiac, a fact that would later become iconic to his brand identity. His family was ethnically Cantonese Chinese, part of Vietnam's ancient merchant diaspora, who had lived in the region for centuries but remained culturally distinct from ethnic Vietnamese. At age 16, with only an elementary school education, Tran followed his older brother to Saigon, where he found work in a chemical supply store. Around the time he finished high school, the South Vietnamese government's conscription machinery activated. "I had no choice," Tran later recalled. "At night time, the policeman came and knocked on my door." He was drafted into the South Vietnamese army, where he would serve for 5 years. He never saw combat. Instead, he was assigned to work as a cook in army kitchens, where he gained practical experience in food preparation and began experimenting with chili sauce recipes. Following the fall of Saigon in April 1975, Tran relocated to the Mekong Delta region, where his older brother had established a farm growing chili peppers. There, with his brother and his father-in-law, Tran began manufacturing hot sauce on a small scale. He bottled his sauce in recycled Gerber baby food jars discarded by American soldiers during the war. Family members hand-delivered bottles by bicycle to local markets and restaurants. By 1977, the communist government's persecution of Vietnam's ethnic Chinese minority intensified. The regime viewed the Hoa, historically merchants and business people, as foreign agents and capitalist exploiters. The government charged exorbitant fees in gold to permit the Hoa to leave the country, a brutal, state-sanctioned extortion scheme. In December 1978, Tran converted his accumulated assets into 100 ounces of gold, worth approximately $20,000 at the time. To evade authorities who monitored and confiscated precious metals, Tran concealed the gold bars inside cans of condensed milk. He boarded the Huy Fong, a Taiwanese freighter retrofitted to transport refugees, with approximately 2,000 to 3,000 Vietnamese refugees crowded into its hold. The ship headed toward Hong Kong, but Governor Murray McLehos's government refused entry. The Huy Fong anchored offshore for a 34-day standoff that became a major international incident. Refugees suffered from overcrowding, inadequate food and water, and uncertainty about their fate. Tran and his family finally disembarked on January 19, 1979, spending 8 months in a Hong Kong refugee camp before receiving asylum in America. He initially settled in Boston, but received a crucial call from his brother-in-law in Los Angeles, who noted that Southern California's climate was ideal for growing red jalapenos year-round. In January 1980, Tran arrived in Los Angeles with his family and a portion of his gold reserves, and within 1 month he would found a company named after the ship that saved his life. In February 1980, just 1 month after arriving in Los Angeles, Tran formally incorporated Huy Fong Foods, naming the company after the freighter. The name was deliberate, a constant reminder of how far he had traveled. He sold a portion of his gold and purchased a small 2,500 square foot building on Spring Street in Los Angeles' Chinatown. The location was strategic. It placed him near restaurants and grocers who would become his first customers, within a community that appreciated Asian flavors. Working in his cramped Chinatown space, Tran developed a new sauce recipe. He drew inspiration from Sriracha Panich, a celebrated Thai Sriracha brand originating from the coastal town of Sriracha, a sauce he admired but found too mild and sweet for his palate. Tran adapted the Thai recipe to create a distinctly American-Asian hybrid, thicker, more garlicky, spicier, and more saline than the original. The result was designed to appeal to the multi-ethnic Los Angeles palate, Vietnamese, Chinese, Mexican, and other immigrant communities who valued intense, bold flavors. Tran hand-painted the company's iconic logo himself, a proud rooster with its head held high, a symbol of luck and prosperity in Chinese and Vietnamese culture, and a reference to his own birth year. The rooster became one of the most recognizable brand symbols in American food history. In his first month of operation, working largely alone with his wife, bottling sauce in his 2,500 square foot facility and hand-delivering it in a blue Chevy van to Asian restaurants across Los Angeles, Tran generated $2,300 in revenue. An extraordinary achievement for a refugee with no business experience, no capital beyond his gold, and no English language marketing. He had no advertising budget, no sales team, and no distribution network beyond his own legs and vehicle. Yet the sauce was good enough that demand outpaced his ability to supply it. By 1987, the company had outgrown its original facility and relocated to a 68,000 square foot warehouse in Rosemead, California, a building that had once housed the toy manufacturer YMHO. Tran contracted with various local farmers to grow jalapenos on a piecemeal basis, purchasing from whoever could meet his specifications. In 1988, a seed distributor informed Craig Underwood about Tran's search for a reliable pepper supplier. Underwood was then struggling with the changing agricultural landscape. Traditional Ventura County crops were facing market saturation. He recognized a gap: consistent supply of premium red jalapenos for processing. Underwood drafted a simple letter to Tran: "Would you like me to grow some peppers?" They began with a contract for 50 acres of jalapenos, a modest initial commitment. Over the subsequent years, their partnership intensified. Underwood expanded from 50 acres to over 1,700 acres, dedicated primarily to Huy Fong. By 2015, Underwood Ranches was producing over 100 million pounds of peppers per year, and Tran was secretly forming a shell company to replace him. Unknown to Craig Underwood, David Tran had begun constructing an exit strategy from their partnership as early as 2014, approximately 26 years into their 28-year relationship. Sometime between 2014 and 2016, Tran quietly formed a company called Chilico LLC, a shell entity whose explicit purpose was to source peppers from alternative suppliers. The LLC was given 100% ownership to Donna Lam, Tran's sister-in-law and executive operations officer. Court documents revealed that Tran created Chilico to give Lam a significant salary increase, circumventing objections from his son William and wife Ada, who served on the company's board. Between 2015 and 2016, Tran launched a targeted recruitment campaign to poach Underwood Ranch's most critical personnel. Most significantly, Tran attempted to hire Roberts, the key operations officer and chief agronomist at Underwood Ranches, the architect of Underwood's harvest systems. His departure would have crippled Underwood's ability to function. In 2016, Tran conducted an unprecedented act of industrial reconnaissance. He flew a drone over Underwood's farm to video record the entire harvest and the mechanical harvesting systems Underwood had developed over decades. After severing ties with Underwood, Tran provided the drone footage to other pepper farmers, essentially transferring Underwood's proprietary harvesting techniques to competitors. In 2013, when the city of Irwindale had attempted to evict Tran's factory due to complaints about pepper grinding odors, Underwood had testified on Tran's behalf at a city council hearing, publicly advocating for the company's right to remain. 3 years later, Tran was secretly planning to destroy him. The public rupture began in autumn 2016. Huy Fong demanded that Underwood refund $1,450,000 that Tran claimed represented an overpayment for the growing season. Underwood disputed the allegation. Their arrangement had evolved over decades into an informal, largely oral agreement rather than a formal written contract. In late 2016, Tran orally agreed to pay Underwood $13,000 per acre for 1,700 acres of peppers for the 2017 growing season, the equivalent of $22,100,000 for a single year's crop. Underwood, believing the relationship had been mended, proceeded on this assumption. The company relied on Tran's oral promise to justify the financial and logistical commitment required to prepare the land, acquire seeds, hire seasonal labor, and organize the growing cycle. In the context of their 28-year relationship and dozens of similar verbal agreements, Underwood took Tran at his word. Days later, Tran informed Underwood's chief operations officer that Huy Fong would not honor the agreement and would not purchase Underwood's peppers for the 2017 season. To maximize the cruelty of the message, Tran timed the notification strategically. He informed Roberts while Craig Underwood was on vacation, ensuring that Underwood could not immediately respond or attempt to negotiate. By January 2017, Underwood Ranches had lost 80% of its revenue overnight. The collapse was catastrophic for Underwood Ranches. The company was forced to lay off approximately 45 to 50 employees, roughly half of staff. In 2017 alone, Underwood Ranches lost approximately $8,500,000. In 2018, the company lost another $6 million. Huy Fong struck first, filing a breach of contract lawsuit demanding that Underwood refund the disputed overpayment. Underwood responded with a cross-complaint alleging fraud, fraudulent concealment, and intentional interference with contractual relations. The trial commenced in June 2019 in Ventura County Superior Court. Tran testified on the opening day, stating emotionally, "We were like family. I really trusted him, but I never expected this. A relationship that lasted 28 years today, we ended up in court." His statement was deeply ironic. The betrayal he described was of his own making. The trial surfaced damaging evidence of Tran's premeditated plan to exit the relationship. The formation of Chilico in 2014 to 2015. The drone footage taken in 2016 without Underwood's knowledge. The transfer of harvesting techniques to other farmers. The recruitment of Roberts. The strategic timing of the breach notification while Underwood was on vacation. The jury returned a unanimous verdict in favor of Underwood Ranches on all major claims. The jury found that Huy Fong had breached its oral contract. The jury found that Huy Fong committed fraud through fraudulent concealment. That a confidential relationship arising from their 28-year history gave rise to a duty to disclose Tran's secret intention to terminate. The jury found that Huy Fong's oral promise to purchase the 2017 crop was made with the knowledge and intent that Tran would not honor it. The damages award $8,500,000 in compensatory damages for 2017 losses, $6 million for 2018 losses, minus the disputed overpayment refund for net compensatory damages of approximately $13,300,000, plus $10 million in punitive damages. Total judgment against Huy Fong, $23,300,000. The punitive damage award reflected the jury's assessment that Tran's conduct was not merely negligent or intentionally wrongful. It was oppressive, malicious, and worthy of financial punishment beyond mere compensation. Huy Fong appealed. In August 2021, the California Court of Appeal unanimously affirmed the judgment, declaring, "There is ample evidence to support a finding of fraud based on fraudulent concealment and affirmative misrepresentation." By September 1, 2021, Huy Fong Foods had satisfied the $23,300,000 judgment. Craig Underwood later testified, "They were 80% of our business. We lost money 3 years in a row. I can't say that we're better off today than we were before the settlement. The money helped, but it could not restore what had been destroyed, and Tran was about to discover what he had lost. The destruction of the Underwood partnership set off a cascading collapse. Tran frantically sourced jalapenos from suppliers in Mexico, but the network remained fragmented and unreliable. In April 2020, Huy Fong issued its first public production suspension notice, citing low inventory. Beginning in the winter of 2022, Mexico experienced a catastrophic multi-year drought. By May 2024, approximately 76% of Mexico was experiencing drought conditions, the worst since June 2011. Red jalapenos are climate-sensitive crops requiring consistent water and precise ripening conditions. By early May 2024, Huy Fong's Mexican suppliers informed the company that available pepper inventory was too green to meet quality specifications. Tran halted production entirely from May through Labor Day, 4 months encompassing Memorial Day weekend, summer BBQ season, and back-to-school season. Consumer panic ensued. Bottles of Huy Fong Sriracha appeared on eBay and Amazon resale with markups of 200 to 400%. Some bottles sold for $80 compared to a normal retail price of $3 to $4. When Huy Fong resumed production in late September 2024, the source was no longer the deep crimson red that had defined the brand for 40 years. It was bright orange, a distinctly different visual product that signaled something fundamental had changed. Beyond the color shift, consumers reported profound taste differences: sweeter, less peppery, heavy garlic notes, milder heat. The taste shift was not due to a deliberate recipe change. It reflected terroir, the flavor of agricultural products shaped by soil, climate, and cultivation practices. Underwood's jalapenos had been grown in Ventura County soil enriched by decades of cultivation optimization, harvested within hours of peak ripeness. Mexican peppers, grown in different soil under different climate patterns with longer lag times between harvest and processing, produced different flavor compounds. While Huy Fong stumbled, competitors pounced. Tabasco captured the #1 selling Sriracha position in the United States for the second half of 2023. And in what represents one of the most compelling narrative reversals in American business, Craig Underwood, the man Tran had destroyed, launched his own Sriracha brand using the exact same peppers that had defined the original Huy Fong sauce. He called it Dragon Sriracha, marketed under the tagline, "The Original Taste." Early adopters found that Dragon Sriracha tasted almost identical to the old Huy Fong from the pre-2017 Underwood era. By early 2024, Dragon Sriracha had secured distribution at Costco. The farmer Tran had destroyed through litigation was now eating into Huy Fong's market share with a product that consumers preferred. David Tran stands at 80 years old, owning a company still valued at approximately $1 billion. He remains America's only hot sauce billionaire. But the orange sauce on supermarket shelves is a monument to what happens when a man destroys the partnership that made his empire possible. And now, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Did David Tran's betrayal of Craig Underwood destroy the very thing that made Huy Fong legendary? Or was the single supplier model always destined to fail? We look forward to the discussion below, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Luxury. Cheers.